I never meant for her to notice. But when she looked at me and said, "Don't act innocent," I saw how you looked at me. Something in the air changed forever. The afternoon sun slanted through the tall glass windows of the old university hall, painting thin, golden lines across the floor. Dust floated lazily in the air, catching the light like slow-moving stars. I'd walked this hallway 100 times when I was a student, but today felt different. Maybe it was because she was here, Professor Marin Hayes. She was standing at the front of the lecture hall like time hadn't dared touch her. Sharp as ever in a cream-colored blouse and tailored black slacks. Her hair was tied back in that low, careless knot I remembered. She wasn't just teaching today. She was speaking to a room full of alumni and students, bridging years with her calm, steady voice. I took a seat at the back, pretending it was for the view of the stage. But really, I just needed the distance to steady my heartbeat. Her voice had always had this quiet pull to it, low, warm, deliberate. She didn't rush words. She made you lean in to catch every one of them. And I did, just like before. Only now, I wasn't a restless 19-year-old. I was 24 with the uncomfortable awareness of what it meant to really notice someone. She scanned the room mid-sentence, her eyes searching the sea of faces, and then they landed on mine. Just for a second. A small, almost imperceptible pause. I told myself I imagined it. But the way her lips curved slightly before she went on? No, she'd seen me, and she remembered. My throat tightened. I looked away, pretending to take notes on my phone. My hands felt heavier than they should. Her voice carried on, eloquent, measured, talking about literature and how stories were built not just from words, but from the silences between them. The irony wasn't lost on me, because the silence between us in that moment was saying more than I could process. She gestured gracefully with her hands as she spoke, and a lock of hair slipped loose from her knot. She tucked it behind her ear without missing a beat. The movement was so familiar it hit me harder than I expected. A small, ordinary gesture, but it pulled me backward in time and, somehow, closer to her. When the lecture ended, the applause filled the room like rain. I clapped too, a little too slowly. She didn't look at me again, or maybe she did and I just wasn't brave enough to meet her eyes this time. As people stood and began to filter out, she gathered her notes with practiced ease. And then, just as she was about to step off the stage, she glanced over her shoulder, directly at me. Not a long look, just a flicker, but it was enough to feel like she'd pulled the ground out from under me. In that brief, quiet second, I wasn't just another former student. She saw me, and I knew something had shifted. The hallway outside the lecture hall had thinned out by the time I stepped out. The echoes of conversations drifted down the corridor. Alumni catching up, students laughing in clusters, footsteps fading against the old tiled floor. She was still there. Professor Marin Hayes stood near the door, her lecture notes tucked against her chest, talking to one of the event organizers. She looked calm, composed, the way she always had. The way she carried herself made the rest of the world look like background noise. I almost kept walking. I almost let the moment slip by, convincing myself it was better to leave the past where it belonged. But then she laughed softly at something the organizer said, a low, warm sound, and it pulled me back like a tide. Before I knew it, I was walking toward her. She turned just as the organizer left. Our eyes met, really met, for the first time in years. And I swear, there was a flicker of something familiar there. Not just recognition. Something quieter, warmer. Still hiding in the back row, she said. Her voice was lighter than it had been on stage, laced with amusement. I exhaled a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Some habits don't die that easily. She tilted her head, studying me the way she used to study texts. Carefully, like there was always more to read between the lines. You've grown into your voice, she said after a pause. You used to mumble whenever I asked you to speak up. I chuckled, trying to keep it casual, but inside everything felt slightly off balance, the way the air does before a storm. I still do. I just fake it better now. That earned me a small smile. Not a polite, distant one. A real smile. The hallway had emptied almost completely now. The fluorescent lights above hummed softly, and somewhere down the corridor, a door creaked shut. It was just the two of us. She shifted her notes from one arm to the other, closing the distance between us by a small, deliberate step. She didn't touch me, but I could feel the warmth radiating from her, close enough for me to catch the faint trace of her perfume. Something subtle and elegant, the kind that doesn't shout but lingers quietly in the air. "So what are you doing with yourself these days?" she asked. We talked. About work. About how fast time moves after graduation. About nothing and everything. What should have been a polite 2-minute conversation stretched into 10, 15. The kind where words don't matter as much as the pauses between them. At one point, she laughed at something I said. A soft, surprised laugh that crinkled the corners of her eyes. Her hand brushed my arm lightly as she steadied the folder in her other hand. It wasn't intentional. Or maybe it was. I didn't know. But the contact left a trail of warmth on my skin long after it ended. As the conversation wound down, she glanced at the clock on the wall and sighed softly. "You still overthink everything," she said suddenly, like she'd read it right off my face. I froze, because she was right, and because she remembered. Her smile was small, almost teasing. "Don't," she added quietly. Then she walked past me, her shoulder brushing mine, soft, steady, lingering just long enough to leave a mark. And I stood there in that empty hallway, pulse thudding in my chest, knowing this wasn't just nostalgia anymore. Something was happening, and she felt it too. It happened on a Thursday. Campus was quieter than usual, the kind of quiet that makes every sound feel sharper, like the world's holding its breath. The sun was low, casting warm streaks across the lawn. A few students passed by with earbuds in, some laughing, some lost in their own worlds. I wasn't supposed to be here. I told myself that after our hallway conversation, I'd let it go. But when I saw her through the window of the faculty lounge, sipping her coffee alone, something in me ignored every rational thought I'd rehearsed. I walked over. She was standing outside when I reached her, by the old stone wall that bordered the campus gardens. Her hair was loose this time, falling around her shoulders, catching the light in a way that made time slow down. She wasn't wearing her usual formal jacket, just a soft, gray sweater, simple jeans. She looked less like a teacher and more like someone I could fall into without even realizing it. "Twice in 1 week," she said, raising an eyebrow as I approached. "That's suspicious." I tried to play it off with a shrug. "Maybe I just missed your lectures." She laughed under her breath, low and unhurried. Liar. That laugh, it was dangerous. It carried a kind of ease that could pull anyone closer without them noticing. We stood there for a moment, a little too close for casual conversation. The breeze was soft but cool. A leaf floated down between us, brushing against my sleeve. She watched me with that steady, unblinking gaze, the one she used in class when she already knew the answer but wanted to hear you say it anyway. I shifted my weight, trying to mask the way my chest tightened. She tilted her head slightly, her eyes narrowing, a half-smile playing at her lips. "Don't act innocent," she said quietly, stepping just a little closer. "I saw how you looked at me." The world around us fell away. Just like that. She didn't say it as a scolding. It wasn't playful either. It was somewhere in between, soft, deliberate, like she was giving me nowhere to hide and no reason to run. My mouth went dry. Words hovered at the edge of my tongue but refused to come out. All I could do was hold her gaze and hope she couldn't hear how hard my heart was beating. Her smile deepened, but it wasn't mocking. If anything, it was knowing. A shared secret neither of us had agreed to, but somehow had already been written between us. "You always did look at me like that," she added, almost a whisper now. "You think I never noticed?" The space between us was barely a breath. I could feel the warmth radiating from her, smell the faint trace of coffee and the floral note of her perfume. She wasn't touching me. She didn't need to. The tension was electric, threading through the air. I finally managed a quiet, "I wasn't trying to." "I know," she cut in gently. "But you did." And then, like nothing had happened, she turned, tucking her hair behind her ear, and started walking away. but she left the words hanging in the air, heavy and irreversible. Don't act innocent. I saw how you looked at me. That line lodged itself somewhere deep inside me, because she didn't just acknowledge it. She claimed it, and now there was no pretending this was nothing. The university courtyard had emptied after the faculty gathering. Soft music and laughter had faded into echoes. Only a few warm lights glowed under the trees, spilling over the cobblestone path that led out toward the main street. I hadn't planned on leaving at the same time as her, but when I stepped outside and saw her walking alone, wrapped in a dark coat, something in me fell into step without asking permission. She heard my footsteps and slowed down. Are you following me? Or is this a coincidence? Coincidence, I said, then added, mostly. She gave me that look again, the half-smile that wasn't exactly an invitation but wasn't a warning either. I should have guessed. We walked side by side in silence for a while. The night air was cool, the kind that prickles against your skin but doesn't bite. The wind moved softly through the leaves above, and the streetlights threw slow-moving shadows across the ground. I could hear the rhythm of our footsteps sync, hers steady and graceful, mine just half a beat behind. She stopped suddenly near a bench beneath an old elm tree. I used to sit here after late classes, she said, when everyone else went home. I looked at her, not as a teacher, not as someone from a past chapter, but as a woman standing under the glow of warm light, with strands of hair moving gently in the breeze. There was something in the way she held herself tonight, a softness that wasn't usually visible in daylight. I thought teachers just went home to grade papers and judge us silently, I said. She laughed quietly, tilting her head. That's part of the job, yes, but sometimes I just wanted to breathe. She sat down on the bench, crossing one leg over the other. I followed, careful to keep a respectful distance, but the air between us had its own gravity. The night wrapped around us like a soft blanket, and the silence wasn't awkward. It was alive. After a moment, she looked at me. Really looked. You've changed, she said. But the way you look at people, it's still the same. Careful. Like you're trying to memorize everything. I swallowed hard. She had no idea how right she was. Or maybe she did. I notice things, I said softly, especially when they matter. The wind pushed her hair gently across her face. Without thinking, I reached out to brush it away, but stopped just before touching her. She didn't flinch. She just watched me, eyes calm but not distant. Then, slowly, she tucked the strand behind her ear herself. A small, almost imperceptible smile crossed her lips. This shouldn't feel this right, she whispered. Neither of us said anything after that. We just sat there, listening to the quiet, the streetlights glowing gold around us. Her hand rested on the bench between us, close enough that if I shifted just slightly, our fingers would touch. But I didn't, and neither did she. The not touching was louder than a touch ever could be. It started with a message. Not a long one. Just a simple, "Are you free this evening?" I told myself it was harmless. Cup of coffee. A conversation between two people who happened to keep crossing paths. But the truth was, neither of us had been able to stop thinking about the other. And tonight, whether we admitted it or not, was a choice. The cafe was tucked away on a quiet side street, warm light spilling from its windows like a soft invitation. It was the kind of place that didn't rush anyone out, where time stretched itself thin and words came slower. When I walked in, she was already there, sitting by the corner window, a book open in front of her that she clearly wasn't reading. She looked up when the door chimed, and for a heartbeat, everything else, the noise, the soft jazz, the smell of roasted coffee, faded out. It was just her. Marin wasn't dressed like a teacher tonight. She wore a simple black sweater, sleeves pushed up to her elbows, hair loosely tied. No pretense, no guard. And maybe that was what made my chest ache a little. "You're late," she said softly, though her smile betrayed any real annoyance. "You're early," I replied, sliding into the chair across from her. We talked at first the way people talk when they're trying not to step into dangerous waters, work, random things, the weather, but there was a current beneath every word. Every glance stretched a little too long. Every silence lingered like an unfinished thought. She stirred her coffee slowly, her fingers wrapped around the cup like she needed the warmth. "I shouldn't be here," she said finally. Her voice wasn't firm. It was tired, like she'd been arguing with herself long before I arrived. "Neither should I," I admitted. She exhaled, leaning back in her chair. "You're making this harder than it should be." The words weren't cruel. If anything, they were soft, an ache disguised as restraint. I wanted to say something clever, something that would make it easier for both of us. But honesty got there first. "You could have ignored my message." Her eyes flicked up to mine. "But I didn't." The silence after that was different. It wasn't heavy with guilt, it was honest. The kind of silence that doesn't need to be filled. Her knee brushed mine under the table. Not deliberately, but neither of us moved away. She looked down at her cup, then at me. Her eyes weren't guarded anymore. They were warm and terrified at the same time. "If anyone knew," she whispered. "I know," I said quietly. "This could ruin everything for me." I nodded, because she wasn't wrong. This wasn't a movie. It was real, with real weight and consequences. But the way she was looking at me in that moment made it almost impossible to care about anything else. She didn't touch my hand. I didn't reach for hers. But the air between us had already chosen a side. The rain started before I even got to campus. Not a heavy storm, just that steady kind of rain that soaks everything slowly, like time itself is dripping. The world felt muted. Car lights blurred through the mist, wet pavement shone like black glass, and the sound of rain hitting the old brick buildings echoed softly through the empty quad. I waited under the eaves of the main hall, hands shoved deep in my jacket pockets, water dripping from my hair. I didn't have a plan. All I knew was that I couldn't keep letting this thing between us live in glances and unfinished sentences. I needed to see her. I needed to say it out loud. The door creaked open behind me. She stepped out with an umbrella half folded in her hand, wearing a dark coat, her hair a little messy from the weather. She froze when she saw me, surprise flickering in her eyes. "What are you doing here?" she asked softly. "Waiting," I said. My voice came out rougher than I intended. For a moment, neither of us moved. The rain filled the silence for us, tapping on the roof, whispering against the stone steps. She slowly walked closer, lowering the umbrella slightly so I could see her face clearly. There was a tiredness there, yes, but also something she wasn't naming. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "I know," I breathed. "But I am." She stopped right in front of me, close enough that the rain hit the ground just inches from our shoes, close enough that I could see the faint raindrops clinging to her lashes. Her perfume was muted by the rain, softer now, like it belonged to the night itself. "Marin," I said, the word catching somewhere between my chest and throat. "I can't keep pretending this is nothing." Her lips parted, but no words came. The umbrella tilted slightly to one side, letting a streak of rain slide onto her shoulder. "I've tried to act like it's just in my head," I continued, voice steady now. "Like the way I look at you is something I can hide. But you saw it. You've always seen it." Something shifted in her eyes. Not shock, not anger, just something breaking open quietly. "You're making this impossible," she murmured, but her voice cracked on the last word. "I don't want to make it impossible. I took a step closer, not touching her, just enough to let the warmth of our bodies push against the cold air. "I've wanted to tell you." Her breath caught. She lifted her hand, slowly, uncertain, and reached for my hair, damp from the rain. Her fingers brushed it back from my forehead. A small, thoughtless gesture that said everything she wouldn't. Her hand lingered there for a heartbeat too long. Then another. "I shouldn't," she whispered. "I know," I said. "But you are." The rain was falling harder now, but we didn't move. I reached up, fingers brushing hers where they still rested against my hair. She didn't pull away. And then, slowly, she let her forehead rest against mine. No kiss, no rush, just that quiet, trembling closeness. The kind that says this is real even if the world would rather it wasn't. In that moment, the rain didn't matter. The rules didn't matter. Only the silence between two people who'd finally stopped lying to themselves. The rain had passed by morning, leaving the world washed clean. The trees around campus dripped slowly, their branches heavy with water. The pavement still shimmered in soft patches of light, and the air smelled like wet earth and something new. I sat on the low wall near the faculty gardens, the same spot where she'd once looked at me and said the words that changed everything. "Don't act innocent. I saw how you looked at me." It felt like a lifetime ago, though only days had passed. Funny how everything can shift quietly, beneath the surface, until you can't go back to pretending. When I heard footsteps behind me, I didn't need to turn to know it was her. Marin walked toward me with her hands tucked in the pockets of her coat, hair loose around her face. The sunlight broke through the clouds for the first time in hours, catching the edges of her hair and making it glow faintly. She didn't look like a teacher right now. She didn't look untouchable. She just looked real, human, and that might have been the most dangerous thing of all. "You're early?" I said, trying to sound casual, but my voice betrayed how hard my heart was pounding. "I didn't want to be late," she replied softly. We stood facing each other in the soft, cool morning air. No one else was around. No noise, no distractions. Just the aftermath of everything unsaid. "I've been thinking," she started. Her voice was calm, but her hands shifted in her pockets like she wasn't as composed as she wanted to be. "About us. About this." I didn't interrupt her. I didn't need to. She took a slow breath. "I can't pretend what happened last night didn't mean anything. And I can't keep treating this as if it's just a misunderstanding. It's not." The words hung between us, soft but solid, like stones placed gently on a path. "I know what people will say," she went on. "I know what this could cost me. But—" She hesitated, and that hesitation said more than the words that followed. "I don't want to spend my life being afraid of things that feel real." I stepped closer. Not too close, just enough so she could feel I was here, steady. "I don't know what happens next," I admitted. "I don't have all the answers, but I know what I want." She lifted her gaze to mine. For the first time, there wasn't a wall behind her eyes. No teacher, no rules, just her. "I want us to decide this together," I said. "Whatever happens next, good or bad." The smallest smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. It wasn't a fairy tale smile. It was quiet, honest, the kind of smile that belongs to someone who's done fighting themselves. She reached out her hand, slow, deliberate, and I took it, warm against the chill of the morning. Firm, real. For the first time, we didn't look away. Her thumb brushed lightly against my palm. A simple touch, but it carried everything we hadn't been able to say for years. "This isn't going to be easy," she whispered. "I know," I said, "but it's ours." The sunlight finally broke free of the clouds, spilling over us like a soft promise. There were still questions waiting ahead, judgments, uncertainty, but we weren't standing on opposite sides of it anymore. We were standing side by side, and that made all the difference. "I've been thinking," she started. Her voice was calm, but her hands shifted in her pockets like she wasn't as composed as she wanted to be. "About us. About this. I want us to decide this together," I said. "Whatever happens next, good or bad."